the Arab American Initiative and the initiatives by the civil society, by the private sector, by the different actors is very much needed and welcomed, because governments alone cannot fulfill these funding requirements of the 2030 agenda. It needs multi-stakeholders, it needs governments in addition to the private sector, to the civil society. So this initiative comes in this vein, and of course we look forward to the success and to the positive impact of such initiatives.
Les SDGs soient servis, mais aussi que l'agenda 2063 de l'Afrique soit aussi très bien servi. Je pense que c'est une initiative qui vient à son heure, et il est important donc que les pays africains se mobilisent, que les pays arabes aussi se mobilisent, et ce sera aussi un moyen de mieux resserrer le partenariat et, disons, la coopération exemplaire qui a toujours existé entre le monde arabe et l'Afrique.
Parfait, merci. Et vous avez bien dit le nom qui voulait.
This kind of public-private partnership where IT companies, tech companies help the governments to better run the country, to make it more efficient but also more accessible to the people there, both in Arab and the African continent. This is something just to consider.
As well as the return of capital. And if we figure out a way where the UN, private sector, governments, and host countries come together and create these multi-stakeholder partnerships, magic can happen. But without that, it will remain a challenge. We're concerned that the SDGs, now we only have about probably
Welcome all. I'm Michael Saba, Representative Michael Saba, member of the South Dakota State Legislature. And yes, we do have Arab Americans and African Americans in South Dakota. Believe it or not, I was formerly the Executive Director of the National Association of Arab Americans and a member of the board of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, and very active with the both the African American and the Arab American communities throughout the United States, starting in the late 60s all the way to the present. Can you hear me? Can you hear me better now? Yeah. And interestingly, in the Dakotas, where I'm from, North and South Dakota, the very first mosque in all of North America was built by a group of Syrian Muslims, and so it goes down in history as the very first mosque that was designated a mosque in all of North America. The first two senators of Arab descent, U.S. senators, Senator James Aburizik and Senator James Abdullah, were from South Dakota. So, in spite of the fact we're a small population and do not have a lot of diversity, it's a changing. We've always had Arab American and African Americans there, and more recently, quite a number of immigrants. We have over 5,000 people from South Sudan in the town I live in, South Dakota, that are recent immigrants to South Dakota, recent Americans. And we have thousands of people from the refugee camps in Kenya and Tanzania. So it's a changing environment. And it's an honor to be here to be able to welcome all of you, to be able to introduce the speakers for the day. I also would like to point out that I was a member of the very first conference of this kind. I attended in 2006 when I was the head of the National Association of Arab Americans. And that was launched here at the UN in a very important meeting. The initiative was started on the Arab African Initiative for Sustainable Development, based on the Millennium Goals and the goals of 2030. And subsequently there have been other meetings, and the purpose of this meeting is it's a crucial step in soliciting feedback from relevant stakeholders as to the forming partnerships, seeing how we can meet those Millennium Goals, combining the efforts of the Middle East and Africa together to see development be where it should be. And I think there are very positive indicators. And the initiative was last conducted last year. And then the coordinator, or the president of the group was chosen. Given the fact that this is the year of Egypt at the UN, we were honored to have as our first speaker the president and the coordinator for the initiative, and I'd like to introduce him and have him say a few words. Mr. Ahmed Fadel.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome for this meeting today. Today we commence our second meeting for the Arab-African Initiative. In the first meeting, we laid down our goals to focus on promoting the role of the private sector, businesswomen, and civil society groups to achieve the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. In Africa and the Arab world today, we need to lay down the plan of action to fulfill these goals. First, we will review the conclusion of the consultation with both the business leaders and government officials on what is the best format to establish such a public-private partnership to achieve the role of the private sector, businesswomen, and civil society groups in promoting the development goals. Second, we will present the mechanism we are looking forward to establish to assist in providing financing for the real partners in development I mentioned, such as the private sector, women, and the civil society groups. Third, we would like to explore the possibility of holding a conference on financing development with the major developmental funds in the two regions. I would like to express my appreciation for the support we received from our brothers, the ambassador of Senegal and Guinea, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Egypt, of course. You're welcome all. I would like also to express my appreciation for the support we received from the UN officials, Mr. Rashed, special envoy of the Secretary General to South. Ms. Bians, the Special Advisor to Secretary General on Africa, and a special thanks to the President of the General Assembly and Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General. Thank you all and appreciate about your attendance today. Thank you too much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fadel. I had the honor of meeting John F. Kennedy when I was a college student when he was campaigning for the presidency. He actually came to the Dakotas. And he talked about a concept in those years of American young people serving their country not only as in the military, but also serving it with something he hadn't even named before. He said, I want you young people to be able to go to other countries and help people in education, help them in community development, do things that they need done, and show them that we do care. We in the United States do care about development in these countries. And that later became the Peace Corps. And I was one of the very first Peace Corps volunteers in the early 60s. And then was fortunate to serve as a Peace Corps trainer in Malawi, in Kenya, in Somalia, and in Swaziland. And so I feel very close to so many of you with this concept that we're working on in terms of working with African development. My family's roots are in the Middle East. My father was an immigrant from Lebanon. So for me, this is the kind of ultimate to work with a group like you to see what we in America can also do to help stimulate this particular activity. And I've been fortunate to do subsequent things in both Africa and the Middle East. I many of you probably heard of the project 57357 in Egypt, which is now the world's largest children's cancer hospital. I was, at the time, before that was built, I was working at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which is the premier children's cancer hospital in the world. And a young man, a physician from Egypt, came to St. Jude and was very inspired, and he said, I want to do this in Egypt, and that has become now the world's largest children's cancer hospital. The 57357 project, which I'm proud to have been part of developing in Egypt. And I also more recently was working with a health institution in South Dakota that is now putting hundreds of clinics in Ghana, children's clinics. This is all part of the development that we're talking about. It's not just financial development, it's infrastructure development. I've been proud to work in that, and I hope to do more if I can. We also have here some other honored people. If I introduced all of the honored people, I'd spend the rest of the afternoon. But at the head table, our next speaker is from the Office of the Deputy Secretary General. And, I'm sorry? President of the Secretary General. The General Assembly, I'm sorry. And so if I may at this point introduce Mr. Jonathan Vieira from Ecuador to say a few words on their behalf.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues, brothers and sisters. On behalf of the President of the General Assembly, I would like to thank for these invitations and also congratulate for this demonstration on how important is the intra-regional integration initiatives. Personally, it's an honor to be here and learn of your brotherhood, and thank you, Ambassador, also for your invitation and leadership in the organization of this launch. Excellencies and colleagues, as you know, in the last years has been very important in this house because we designed the roadmap for the next years. The roadmap in development, the roadmap in financing, the roadmap for the cities, with several instruments. And now, as you know, is the time of the implementation. In particular, this year is very important because we have the conference, the South-South Cooperation Conference, and I think that the spirit in this room is the spirit of the South-South Cooperation. That's why I would like to congratulate for this kind of initiative in this second meeting of the Arab and African Initiative. I would like just to mention that we have several commitments that come from these agendas, and I think that with this kind of initiatives we can learn, all the member states can learn, and obviously we should promote as a member states. For that reason, I think that these kind of working loans and dialogues are very important. Congratulations, and as I said, for the President of the General Assembly, very welcome to having you here in this house, and of course, thank you for all for this invitation and thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I'm sure Mr. Jonathan Vieira from the Office of the President of the General Assembly. The next gentleman I would like to introduce to say a few words is a friend of a friend who recently passed away. My major professor when I finished my degree was a gentleman from Gambia. His name was Dr. Suleiman Yang, who did some tremendous work at Howard University in African and Middle East activities. He was in charge of the African and Middle East department at Howard University. Dr. Suleiman Yang, and his namesake is our next speaker. His Excellency, Mr. Sheikh Yang, who is the permanent representative of Senegal from the UN, and if he may, we would like him to say a few words, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sabah, and I would like to say how happy I am to be here for this event. I would like to thank Ambassador Adel and all your team for the very good job you have done in relaunching this initiative, because it is before. As you know, development financing is one of the main concerns of the International Commission, particularly right now, at the time when they are trying to implement Agenda 2030. And we can see that recommendations emanating from the Addis Ababa program of action still face difficulties of implementation. And this is also slowing the pace of development of many developing countries, including Africa. This is why my country very warmly and very enthusiastically support this initiative, aiming at pulling together, mobilizing financial resources to fund crucial sectors like health, education, agriculture, youth employment, and also participating in empowering women. As you know, Africa is hosting something like 34 LDCs. This just shows how important these funds will be to help develop those countries which are still facing the plight of underdevelopment. And I hope also that the high-level meetings we'll have here in April and September will give us the opportunity to take this initiative, among other initiatives, this initiative on board in order to mobilize better funds for international development. The representative of the President of the General Assembly mentioned it very earlier. This is a typical example of excellent South-South cooperation, and I think this can also be an inspiration for other kinds of partnership. Why I say that? Because, if you look at the partnership between Africa and the Arab world, it has always been a very good partnership, politically and diplomatically. And even individually, countries are having very good cooperation with African countries. But we have never thought of, let's say, trying to pool all the resources we have in a partnership where we have, on the one hand, Africa and the Arab world. I think this is a tremendous opportunity we can exploit and to the very good effect. So as not to be very long, I just want once again to thank you, Ambassador Fadali, and for your initiative and also for relaunching it, because this was launched actually in 2006, if I'm not mistaken, by Her Excellency Sheikh Haya Rashed, who was then president of the 61st session of the General Assembly. I think now we have just to get to work and make it happen. So thank you.
Our final speaker before the meal will be the person that can talk about some of the finances, because in order to make this realistic, we have to go on to one of the other goals, and that's to raise the finances to make this happen. But prior to that, I would just like to introduce a guest of mine that is here also. In South Dakota, in the Dakotas, we have two states, North and South Dakota, and think, 11 different nations, the Native American nations of the Dakotas, with a population of between 10 and 15% of the state. Each one of those nations is a separate reservation that can conduct international business and does conduct international business. And one of the people that I've been working with in the state, through the state legislature to make things happen in development in our states with the Indian reservations is a member of the Chippewa tribe from North Dakota, but working in North and South Dakota. I'd like to introduce her, Miss Michelle Eccles. Our final speaker this afternoon, before we have our meal, and then a bit of a discussion around our meal, will be Mrs. Samia Al-Baroudi, President of Global Investment and Finance, who has been with the World Bank and been active in this initiative for some time. So if we may, we have a few words from Ms. Baroudi.
Thank you, Mr. Saba. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it's a pleasure to be here today. It's an honor. This is a passion of mine, helping countries in Africa and the Arab countries. I want to talk to you today about how to translate this great initiative into concrete action. So I thought about a fund for financing projects in the private sector and the civil society. So I want to talk to you first about the mission of the fund. The mission will be economic growth, employment creation, poverty eradication, by helping through financing the private sector and through financing and supporting the expansion of the private sector by having the right regulatory framework in our member countries. It's very important not just the financing, but to have the environment for the private sector to grow. And also we will focus on building a vibrant civil society. So this is the mission. Why are we doing this? What are the justifications? Justifications are three kinds. There are the moral issues. There are humanitarian crises after humanitarian crisis in our countries, and this is not acceptable anymore. There is poverty, which is rampant in our region, unlike many countries in the world, and we can't accept this anymore. The second set of issues is economic issues. Sluggish economic growth in our countries is not in anybody's interest in this global economy, because we need to have partners that trade with each other based on their comparative advantages so that we can all win. We don't want to have winners and losers in today's economy. We all have to win, and that's why we have to raise the standards of living and encourage economic growth in our countries as much as we can. And the third set of issues is the political issues. We all have seen the migration from our countries into Europe, into other countries, and how it created a backlash, and how it has caused the resurgence of isolationism ideas and nationalistic ideologies, extreme nationalistic ideologies, that cannot be helpful. It can only lead to conflict. So for all these reasons, we really have to take this initiative very seriously and do our best. So what will be the objectives of this fund? The objectives will be simply twofold. One is to be a catalyst of the private sector growth by financing private sector and by encouraging the environment of the private sector to be there in those countries, in our countries. And the second set of goals is to help develop the civil society. Now I want to talk to you about the capital resources of this fund, which I call FAD, Fund for Arab African Development. It will be three sources of funds. The first is equity capital that will be pledged from the member countries. And based on this equity capital, we can raise loans in the financial markets. It can come from financial institutions, international or regional, and it can come from banks, bilateral organizations, or other financial institutions. And we also can get contributions for certain projects that are humanitarian in nature, and this will be not paid back. Also, FAD will have the possibility to co-finance projects with other organizations like the IFC of the World Bank or MIGA of the World Bank, or regional organizations, and in this way it will be able to leverage its resources and will be able to fund larger projects or a larger number of projects. So by now I think you understood that FAD will be a revolving fund, which means it will lend its resources, it will be repaid, and then re-lend them again into new projects. So the FAD operations will be three types: loans to private sector activities, it will be equity participation with an exit strategy, and it will be grants for certain humanitarian or issues that require help that will not produce any payback, therefore it will be just a grant. How will FAD select its projects? FAD will invest in productive private sector activities or private-public partnerships, and it will support those projects that are in the national interest, are in the priority strategy of each country. And these projects will be in any productive field, except, of course, we don't want to finance firearms, tobacco, or any other activity that FAD's Board of Directors deems not acceptable. And the third kind of project selection will be based on building the civil society. The eligibility criteria of those projects will be predetermined by the board of this fund, and they will decide on the eligibility of the projects and operations to be supported. In fact, Board of Directors will meet periodically to decide on the projects that will be suggested by the staff based on these eligibility criteria. Also, another idea, FAD can create local revolving funds when there is institutional capacity in a country to evaluate the projects and to be able to supervise them through completion. So these will be semi-autonomous local revolving funds, but under the supervision of the board and the staff of the fund, the main fund, which I call FAD. There will be smaller projects with a free limit, let's say. Another initiative of this fund, which is very important, is greater participation of women in economic activities, because really no society can truly prosper if roughly 50% of its population is not participating in economic activities. So one of FAD's main priorities will be to support legislative reforms, as well as projects and initiatives that will empower women and ensure their equal rights under the law and their greater participation in economic activities. I want to leave you with a few words about the Marshall Plan, or the Economic Recovery Act of 1948. The Marshall Plan was focused on rebuilding Europe and Japan after World War II. It provided war-torn Europe and Japan with $12 billion, which in today's dollars is about 100 billion or more. And this was to rebuild the infrastructure, institute modern business practices, and create viable trading partners between the European countries and between Europe and the United States and Japan. The plan lasted for 4 years, and by all measures, it was a success. I realize FAD is not a Marshall Plan. However, the Marshall Plan can provide us all with a vision, a dream of what's possible to achieve, with focused attention, determination, an action plan, and financial and human resources. The fund has a decade to achieve what was achieved for Europe and Japan in nearly 4 years. We need to pull together and make this happen. There is no more time to waste after over 70 years of muddling through. We don't have another 70 years. The time to act is now, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
The day I saw his email, I spoke to a esteemed friend, and then traveled from the nation of Senegal. I'm excited, so I discussed it with my PR, and said this is an initiative that we should keep into, because if we are talking about financing an initiative on on the SDGs, enhancing the SDGs, then a country like Sierra Leone should be able to support. Well, I just want to ask some few questions about the origin. You know, it was initiated, when it was first launched, the PJ has been very active. The office of the PJ was supported by the then Secretary General. And then we moved from MDGs, now we are talking about SDGs. I was wondering if there are any existing documents on this beautiful initiative. And then we should be able to see where we succeeded on this initiative and where we did not do well. Because when you look at the trajectory, you should be able to it will help you build onto whatever ideas. The mission is fantastic, building a vibrant civil society and then economic growth. These are all things that we, coming from post-conflict background and having trying to build our economy, we should be able to support this initiative. So I was wondering if there are any existing documents on these initiatives, and then it will help us examine where we did well and where we did not do well, so that we can make it better. Because we must implement this initiative, we must translate it into reality, because it sounds good to me, and I believe it sounds good to everybody around this table. Thank you very much.
I appreciate very much your comment. I was one of the people who started this initiative in 2006 with Jeffrey Sachs at that time and Sheikha Khalifa, who was President of the General Assembly, and with the support of the late Secretary General Kofi Anna. And at that time, as Michael said, we had a meeting here, people from South Africa, from Egypt, from the Arab Gulf, and several people who were really very excited and very supportive. And as a result of that, the President of the General Assembly asked for a special session of the General Assembly on finance and economy, which was later in New York, and then another one in Doha, Qatar. But typical of the politics of diplomacy and the imagination, things go up and down. And for some time it was active, we were active, and then things stabilized, not much activity was going on. Because of the fact that Egypt became the chairman of the African Union in 2019, and because of the fact that we have several business people who are really very active and diplomats and public figures who are very much committed to the goal, particularly Mr. Ahmed al-Fadali and his group. So we restarted this initiative in December 2018, and we moved on. The main concept of this initiative is really the following. It's very easy. The fact that we have so many funds in the Gulf, the Kuwaiti fund, the Saudi fund, and the Abu Dhabi fund, and so on, about 10 funds. All of these funds, they have money for sustainable development and so on, and help in Africa. 80% of these funds are for government-to-government cooperation. 20% is for private and for the civil society. The 20% have not been used for the last 15 years. The accumulation of money is there. Why it has not been used? Because the business community in Africa and the Arab world are not really accustomed to putting together a feasibility study, to move into a long, lengthy negotiation, to provide guarantees by government and so on. So as a result of that, you have a pool of resources which are not used. So this initiative now is trying to tap on this pool of resources, to activate it. So this fund, which Dr. Samia was talking about, will be a facilitator to try to connect the business community in Africa to the business community with a trilateral partnership in Europe, in the United States, and Canada, to put together projects within the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. And then to facilitate that process, helping them to put together a feasibility study, helping them in the negotiation with the funding institutions, monitoring their performance, and then even helping them with guarantees. Specifically, when you ask about text and recording what activities, we have that. We can provide you later on with that. But I'm glad that you raised the issue, how we can move in. I think we need at this particular point to really support the process. There is a real gap there. Nobody used this, tried to fill this gap in the past. We are trying to do that, particularly with Ahmed Fadali and his group. They are really trying to help to give this gap between These being the people who need the funds and the people who have the funds, but still the gap is there. How we can bridge that? And that maybe your thoughts and your ideas and your support can help you.
We're looking at adopting, coming up with a document that we can all adopt.
Yes, we have. Okay. Yes, I would say. I appreciate that you do that.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Thoughts of moving forward?
Good afternoon, everyone, and first of all, a big thanks for the hosts, and also a big thanks for the delicious food you are serving us. Much appreciated during lunchtime. I am Gert Auvert, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Estonia, and I think this initiative, when I read the intro to it and the ideas in it and the discussions I've heard so far, are very interesting. I would like to perhaps provide one more angle to it, and that is the way how we see it is that there is always a possibility, especially coming from a small country, to sort of stretch the coin. And how we in my country have done this is through digitalization, through e-governance solutions, and trying to sort of utilize the same resources for a wider benefit. Estonia launched last autumn together with UNDP a cooperation project. We, besides providing the seed funding for it, but we also provided our know-how. A lot of the systems on e-governance we use are open source, and what that means is they are free of charge. So any country in the world is welcome to take and use them. Of course, I don't mean by that we will come and build. We are too small for that. The key personnel has to come from each and every one of your countries. So there are effective projects in place in countries such as Tunisia, for example, who is very good at utilizing them, and also in Africa, in Rwanda at the moment. These countries can also help others, their neighbors, in bringing others to the same level, and these cooperation opportunities are there. They just need to be utilized, and in my mind that would be an excellent example of South-South cooperation, where countries with similar needs can sort of assess what projects need to be there. I mean, each and every country is unique. The systems are unique, so all of these solutions, of course, need to be sort of, I don't know, to use the expression, tailor-made to fit the purpose and to be best available there. Why we believe it's a good solution is that until 1995 we were an LDC. After regaining our independence from the Soviet Union in 91, 4 or 5 years we struggled very heavily, and for us that was the solution. So we are sort of of course we are very small, 1.35 million people, so in that sense we are maybe not transferable to every equation the same way, but you can look at us like as an example in this, and we gladly share this knowledge and this know-how, and that's why also annually every year we do, together with Estonian E-Governance Academy, e-governance conferences, where usually people from all around the world come and to discuss these issues. So why I'm putting this out there is that sometimes these projects need a more comprehensive or overarching aspect to it, and in my mind that is e-governance and digital solutions. So if that angle could also be considered by you, we would greatly appreciate them. Then personally I would see that it would be beneficial. Thank you very much, and enjoy the lunch.
Yes, we have Mr. Christopher Ruddy from Newsmax Media. I'd like to say a few words.
Embarrassedly, I'm very late. I was in Washington this morning, and everything in Washington is very late. But I was on the plane on the tarmac there in Reagan National for about an hour. But I don't know much about all of your plans. Newsmax is a very significant online media company. We reach about 25 million people each month. And we have a cable news channel, which is now in about 70 million homes. Slobodan was kind enough to invite me. He said this is doing very important work in Africa and with our friends in the Arab world. So I was very interested to come. Some of you may know I have had a long relationship with President Trump, and I was just with him at the St. Patrick's Day party. So I'm hoping that the UN has their version of that tonight. But in any event, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Echo. Any other comments or questions, thoughts? I might just mention briefly that, just a real quick comment. In Kenya, I was able to work with a group out of Minneapolis, a private group, that set up private clinics. They have something like 50 of them in Kenya right now that are run by private citizens, in most cases nurses, former government officials, moving from government to private sector, and they all are money-making. So we don't have to be talking about huge projects. We can talk about projects like that. There are clinics that have maybe 3 or 4 people totally, and they're money-making, entrepreneurial operations. So things like that can happen also, and are happening. We have the deputy secretary from Egypt. We have the deputy ambassador here.
Yeah, here.
Right here. Okay.
Lunch, competing with some very important events that are ongoing because of the CSW week. In fact, this is perhaps the busiest week outside of the September opening of the General Assembly. So the mere fact that you're able to draw such a huge crowd in this room, to a full room, is of course testimony to the importance of the issues that are being discussed here today. And I will not add much because the panelists have really, given us a lay of the land about the important issues that we're facing. The public-private partnerships are key elements in the effort to achieve sustainable development. This is particularly so in Africa and in the Arab world. And any effort towards that aim, especially one that is so well linked with the UN community, with the private sector, with the media, I think is more than welcome. And we wish you all the best in this very laudable effort. Thank you very much.
We also have from the Office of the Secretary General, I'd like him to come up to the podium, please, Mr. Nelson Mo. You might say a few words.
Just to say thank you for having me. The Deputy Secretary General sends best wishes and asks that I come and also convey that to this group. And we very much believe in the partnership and the need to enhance the collaboration and make the best out of it for humanity. And I think it's a good thing that we can regularly have this sort of interactions and keep on with the good work. And thank you once more for having us.
Any other comments? Someone here from Morocco. She left. We have someone from Nigeria.
I should start by appreciating the invitation. We are happy that we are invited to this very important meeting. It's not all the time in the UN you have the President of the General Assembly and the DSG present in your meeting. It speaks to how valuable this meeting is. The panelists, like the DPR of Egypt already said, they have said it all. The program and project is presented in such a manner that's welcome within the United Nations community and again within the African and Arab community. It's a very welcome development. We are happy to be supportive of these very projects. Of course, there is indication that the governments are not in position to finance the SDG as it were. We need the private sector to get involved in financing the SDG. So this project, this initiative is both important in that respect and important because it speaks to South-South cooperation and its benefits. I hope we don't waste much time like we wasted at some points. You know, there is a disconnect, and that the DPR already spoke to. I hope we make efforts not to get back to where we had left. And in doing that, we need ourselves to show some more commitment. We need to bring on board the private sector. If this should be a private sector driven process, then we must devise some means of getting them on board. I'm happy that he's speaking also to the SDG, and we should also know that Africa and the Arab world have one other element among others in common. We are battling with the issue of climate change. We should also look towards that, and perhaps how we can turn this disadvantage into advantage by investing in some areas and aspects that can make us harness the benefits of even climate change, though threatening to all of us. The private sectors, I will be waiting to hear our plans to bring them on board on this. Thank you.
Hi there, as Representative Seba said, I'm Michelle Dauphiné Eccles, Esquire, and I wanted just to say thank you for having me here. I am from the Anishinaabe Nation of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, and there's so many similarities between our indigenous nations here and a lot of the developing countries in Africa. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to learn from some of the models of development that the countries are using, and I'd like to be able to learn from those models. And also, I think there's a lot of opportunity, particularly with sustainable development, business opportunities between our nations and your nations as well. And so I'd like to be able to explore those and take advantage of those as well for us. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to talking to others more about those possibilities for us. And sustainable development is something that's near and dear to our hearts as Indigenous people as well, and so I'm really excited about the possibilities there.
My name is Sheikha, and I'm Special Advisor the UN Office for South-South Cooperation here at the United Nations. Hearing of some encouraging references to South-South cooperation and the possibilities of promoting collaboration among countries of South Africa, areas in which they have developed best practices, certainly remains a matter of our interest. Working towards that goal, we have had some interesting discussions with the stalwarts of this particular initiative, particularly Ambassador Al-Falah and Ambassador Al-Fadali, who are here with us today. I'm grateful for the invitation to us to attend this very successful luncheon, and we certainly will be watching with great interest the development of this initiative, and to the extent that it would end up promoting collective self-reliance among developing countries in Africa in areas that are within the purview of the Sustainable Development Goals. We, to the extent that we would be able to, be happy and honored to be associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Hans Sieberger, and I'm here as the team special interest group team leader of Africa of the Harvard Club in New York. I've been a consultant to a number of African countries over the last 20 years in terms of maritime development. In Africa, we have 54 countries and about 52 ports. Most of the ports are still run by the respective governments. And major international shipping lines don't call on any ports in Africa. Why? Because they just say it's too insecure, it's the waiting line is too long, so the future is in PPP. And this is something that I've been discussing with a number of countries in Africa to form PPPs to also serve as the 16 landlocked countries in Africa that need access to the ports, because the only development that we have in Africa internationally is opening the ports, having a better infrastructure so that the ports really can deal with the international business. Sometimes you will see the ships have to wait 10, 12 and even more days to call on a port. And this has to be changed so that also the international lines will call more on Africa when they come from either from Asia or whether they come from South America. So that's why this initiative is so very, very important for the growth of Africa in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Any other comments or countries that we haven't had any remarks from? Okay, so we're going to have some closing remarks from Ms. Samia Al-Baroudi, and then our final remarks from Mr. Al-Fadli.
I just wanted to say that with so much support of the initiative around the room, and I'm sure also ideas here around the world, I think we should move to the next step, which would be to develop a plan of action, a concrete plan of action with a timetable, so that we don't waste another few years without starting to plan and develop and implement this idea. So, thank you very much.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I speak Arabic and I have translation. أولا نحن سعداء بكم جميعا بتشريفكم اليوم هذه المبادرة الإفريقية العربية.
We're very happy to have you here today, and we welcome you all in this initiative.
ونؤكد أن حضوركم اليوم هو الدافع الرئيسي في إنجاح هذه المبادرة وتلبية احتياجات القارة الإفريقية العزيزة على كل عربي وعلى كل مواطن في العالم يعلم قدر الشعب الإفريقي.
It's very long. Okay, you coming here today is the biggest motive for us to proceed with this initiative and to try and meet all the needs for the African nation.
ونؤكد أيضا أن هذا الاجتماع الذي يعد الثاني بعد الاجتماع الأول عام 2006 حينما طرحت المبادرة على السيدة الشيخة آية خليفة رئيسة الجمعية العامة آنذاك.
And this is, as you all know, the second initiative or the second meeting after the first one in 2006, chaired by Ms. Haya Khalifa.
رئيس الجمعية العامة, President of General Assembly. في هذا الوقت الحقيقة كان هناك سعيا دقيقا لدعم الشعب الإفريقي ووجود آلية للتعاون بين الدول العربية والدول الإفريقية. كان هناك في هذا الوقت سعيا دؤوبا لوجود آلية لدعم الشعب الإفريقي الشقيق والتعاون بين الشعوب العربية والشعوب الإفريقية.
Since then, there has been a sustainable effort to support the African nation and cooperation among them.
ولذلك كان هناك إصرار وبعد أكثر من 15 عاما على ضرورة الاستمرار وتحقيق الهدف. تحقيق الهدف في وجود منظمة لدعم وتأييد التعاون العربي الإفريقي مما يعود للتنمية المستدامة على القارة السمراء.
It has been a consistent effort, as I said, for 15 years to try and help Africa.
وفي هذا التوقيت أيضا وصلنا إلى ما نحن بصدده الآن وهو وجود داعمين بحق في سفارات الدول الإفريقية الشقيقة لكي يخرج هذا الحلم إلى الواقع وإلى التحقيق وإلى تلبية طلبات الشعب الأفريقي.
Now we have supporters in each embassy to help us achieve this dream.
وبالفعل نحن نبدأ اليوم هذه المبادرة بدعم من عدد من الدول الأفريقية والعربية، وهذا الدعم الذي تبلور اليوم في حضوركم. أتمنى السيد حمدي السيد سبيل ممكن تساعدنا في الترجمة عشان يبقى أسهل. بس لا خلي ريتا.
She's doing a great job.
صح عشان مش عارف.
She is doing a great job. She is translating. A lot of people here understand, right?
أن يصل المعنى تقدري يا حبيبي بالتفصيل. أتمنى أن يصل المعنى إلى كل مشارك هنا أننا بصدد تحرك إيجابي، ولسنا في حاجة إلى فرد، نحن في حاجة إلى مجموعة، نحن في حاجة إلى رأي جماعي، نحن في حاجة إلى عزيمة وإصرار على استكمال المسيرة.
So, at this time, we need all the efforts of all the participants here and those who are not here to make this dream a reality. We need determination, we need plan, and we need to move forward. We need to make it happen.
ومن هنا نعلن اليوم أننا بدأنا في تحقيق وتحرير المعاهدة التي تربط بين الأشقاء العرب والأفارقة، ويدعمهم أيضا من خارج هذا القالب الدعم الأوروبي والأمريكي الذي شهدناه منذ أيام قليلة. سوف يتم تحرير هذه المعاهدة لكي تكون بداية للعمل مع الأمم المتحدة لخروج مشروع منظمة دعم القارة الأفريقية والمناطق الأكثر فقرا دعما حقيقيا وترى النور إن شاء الله داخل الأمم المتحدة.
We are working today. We are working on a treaty between the countries involved and between the countries of Europe and the United States and other countries to bring this vision into reality to help the African countries and the Arab countries.
وفي هذا الإطار نحن نقدر تماما لكل مشارك اليوم في هذا الاجتماع الدعم الذي حققه للقارة الإفريقية وللتعاون العربي الإفريقي، وهذه المبادرة التي بدأت تتحول اليوم من مبادرة إلى منظمة عالمية حكومية سوف ينبسط عنها صندوقا تلقينا الموافقات المبدئية من كل من عدد من الصناديق العربية الكبرى، بنك جدة الإسلامي، أيضا صندوق الرعاية الإماراتية، صندوق الرعاية داخل دولة مملكة البحرين، عدد من رجال الأعمال والهيئات الاقتصادية الكبرى في مصر، كبريات الشركات في منطقة شمال دول أفريقيا وافقت على المشاركة في دعم صندوق الأمم المتحدة لدعم القارة الصفراء لدعم الشعب الأفريقي.
There are good news that we received today the support from many funds around the world, Arab funds and other funds to support this African initiative, African and Arab initiative, and the fund that we're going to create in order to support the private sector and private public partnership and to move forward. So these are great news that we already got the support of these funds.
وسوف نبدأ في إجراءات إنشاء صندوق الأمم المتحدة لدعم الشعب الأفريقي، الشعوب الأفريقية خلال الساعات القادمة، وذلك من خلال المنظمة التي تبلورت من هذه المبادرة.
And we're going to start immediately to formulate this fund that has been endorsed through this meeting, and we're going to make this fund a reality. As of today, we're going to start working on that, and so that we can support our dear African continent and Arab countries.
وأنا بدعو كل السادة السفراء اللي شاركوا في هذه المبادرة وكل الشخصيات الوطنية المحبة للسلام ودعم الأشقاء الأفارقة للمشاركة في المؤتمر الذي سينعقد في شرم الشيخ لقاء مصغرا مع السادة المشاركين، لقاء بدعوة منا إن شاء الله المسؤولين عن المبادرة في شرم الشيخ الشهر القادم بحضور سيادة سفير السنغال وسفراء الدول الإفريقية الأخرى التي شاركت بقوة وأعلنت دعمها وكتبت ذلك منذ ساعات قليلة.
So I would like to invite all of you, Your Excellencies, to a conference we're going to have in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt next month, so that we can continue developing this initiative and
Work and tourism.
So it will be work and tourism. Because Sharm el-Sheikh is a paradise, I can tell you that.
وإنه يسعدنا أن نؤكد هذه الدعوة الآن وأن نؤكد أن السيدة كريستينا سوف تتلقى طلبات والاتصالات الخاصة بكل رغبة السادة السفراء والبعثات الدبلوماسية هنا في نيويورك لكي يتم تنفيذ هذه الزيارة فورا والاجتماع في أسرع وقت ممكن لتنفيذ هذه العملية الإنسانية الكبيرة لصالح القارة الإفريقية.
Ms. Christina is going to receive your desire to go to this conference, your desire to participate so that we can plan in Sharm el-Sheikh, receiving all your excellencies, ladies and gentlemen who supported this idea to the conference so that we can continue developing this idea and make it a reality.
وفي النهاية بنشكر حضراتكم جميعا وبنؤكد أن هذه المبادرة وهذه الجهود جاءت متواكبة مع جهد مصر في دعم الشعوب الإفريقية الأشقاء الأفارقة، جاءت متواكبة أيضا مع رئاسة مصر للاتحاد الإفريقي منذ أوائل الشهر الماضي، ولذلك سوف تتسم هذه المبادرة بالاتساق الكامل في دعم جهود مصر للنهوض بالشعوب الإفريقية وأيضا دعم خطة النهوض بالشعب الإفريقي والتنمية المستدامة 2030 كما نصت عليها خطة الأمم المتحدة.
It's very interesting that talking about this initiative that we talked about today is coinciding with Egypt being the leader of the African nations, chairman of the African Union, the chairman of the African Union, and this will create synergies in order to realize this idea as quickly as possible.
وفي النهاية وليس النهاية إن شاء الله ننقل إليكم يعني في إطار وجود الرئيس السيسي رئيس مصر في النهوض بالشعب الأفريقي، فنحن نؤكد أننا نتوجه بالشكر من هنا لجهوده ونؤكد أننا سنسعى في نفس الطريق لكي نتلاقى على هدف واحد هو دعم الشعب الأفريقي إن شاء الله.
We'd like to transmit to you the greetings of President el-Sisi and his commitment to the African continent and his commitment to the development of the African continent.
شكرا جزيلا لحضراتكم. Thank you for all and we meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh إن شاء الله.
With that, unless there are any other comments or questions, we'd like to thank you all for coming.